When Jung discovered his own personal myth, he declared that his life thus took on an objective, impersonal meaning. Speaking of his confrontation with the unconscious, he writes, "It was then that I ceased to belong to myself alone, ceased to have the right to do so. From then on, my life belonged to the generality." The fact that Jung's personal life belonged to the generality was demonstrated by the uncanny parallelism between the critical episodes of his inner life and the collective crisis of Western civilization. His first major confrontation with the unconscious occurred simultaneously with the collective catastrophe of World War I. From 1914 to 1918, while the nations were engaged in a brutal external conflict, Jung endured the inner equivalent of the World War, withstanding and integrating the upheaval of the collective unconscious from within. Again, during World War II, Jung had his supreme revelation of the unconscious, his visions of the conjunctio at the time of a grave illness in 1944. Jung achieved a psychological equivalent of war by which the conflict of the opposites was contained within the individual psyche. Almost all the important episodes of Jung's life can be seen as a paradigmatic of the new mode of being, which is the consequence of living by a new myth. Now let's consider the nature of the new myth which he discovered and which released him from his mythless condition. Jung got a glimpse of his new myth while visiting the Pueblo Indians in the western United States in the early part of 1925. He succeeded in gaining the confidence of Mountain Lake, a chief of the tribe. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung described his conversation with Mountain Lake. Mountain Lake said, "The Americans want to stamp out our religion. Why can they not let us alone? What we do not only for ourselves, but for the Americans also. Yes, we do it for the whole world. Everyone benefits by it." I could observe from his excitement that he was alluding to some extremely important element of his religion. I therefore asked him, "You think then that what you do in your religion benefits the whole world?" He replied with great animation, "Of course, if we did not do it, what would become of the world?" And with a significant gesture, he pointed to the sun. I felt that we were approaching extremely delicate ground here, verging on the mysteries of the tribe. "After all," he said, "we are a people who live on the roof of the world. We are the sons of Father Sun, and with our religion, we daily help our Father to go across the sky. We do this not only for ourselves, but for the whole world. If we were to cease practicing our religion, in 10 years the sun would no longer rise. Then it would be night forever." I then realized on what the dignity, the tranquil composure of the individual Indian was founded. It springs from his being a son of the sun. His life is cosmically meaningful, for he helps the Father and preserver of all life in his daily rise and descent. This belief of the Pueblos that they help their Father, the Sun, to rise each day and make his transit of the heavens turns out to be a primitive, naive version of Jung's new myth. Later in 1925, while traveling in Africa, Jung had another experience that crystallized the formulation of the myth more explicitly. Jung writes, "From Nairobi, we used a small Ford to visit the Atlee Plains, a great game preserve. From a low hill in this broad savanna, a magnificent prospect opened out to us. To the very brink of the horizon, we saw gigantic herds of animals, gazelles, antelopes, zebras, and so on. Gazing, heads nodding, the herds moved forward like slow river. There was scarcely any sound save the melancholy cry of a bird of prey. This was the stillness of the eternal beginning, the world as it had always been, in the state of non-being. For until then no one had been present to know that it was this world. I walked away from my companions until I had put them out of sight. and savored the feeling of being entirely alone. There I was now, the first human being to recognize that this was the world, but who did not know that in this moment he had first really created it. There, the cosmic meaning of consciousness became overwhelmingly clear to me. What nature leaves imperfect, the art perfects, says the alchemist. Man, in an invisible act of creation, put the stamp of perfection on the world by giving it objective existence. This act we usually ascribe to the Creator alone, without considering that in so doing we view life as a machine calculated down to the last detail, which along with the human psyche runs on senselessly, obeying foreknown and predetermined rules. In such a cheerless clockwork fantasy, there is no drama of man, world and God. There is no new day leading to new source, but only the dreariness of calculated process. My old Pueblo friend came to mind. He thought that the reason for his existence had been to help their father, the sun, to cross the sky each day. I had envied him for the fullness of meaning in that belief, and had been looking about without hope for a myth of my own. Now I knew what it was, and knew even more, that man is indispensable for the completion of creation, that in fact he himself is the second creator of the world, who alone has given to the world its objective existence, without which, unheard, unseen, silently eating, giving birth, dying, heads nodding, through the millions of years, it would have gone on in the profoundest night of non-being, down to its unknown end. Human consciousness created objective existence and meaning, and man found his indispensable place in the great process of being. In answer to Job, Jung puts it more succinctly: existence is only real when it is conscious to somebody. That is why the Creator needs conscious man, even though from sheer unconsciousness he prevents human beings from becoming conscious. This is the ultimate fight, a fight against God for the sake of God, to fight against the desire to remain unconscious, to fight in order to become conscious, and through consciousness make the existence of God a reality. In his autobiography, Jung writes, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. Neither should he persist in his unconsciousness, nor remain identical with the unconscious elements of his being, thus evading his destiny, which is to create more and more consciousness. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. It may then be assumed that just as the unconscious affects us, so the increase in our consciousness affects the unconscious." These are the chief statements Jung has made concerning the emerging new myth. The essential idea of this new myth is that the purpose of human life is the creation of consciousness.